Coming up on Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace.
The mom, she was holding him and she handed it to me and I was weeping. I just said, thank you, thank you. She wiped the tears off my face and her comforting me. It was sacrificial on her part, but I'm so thankful. I will always be thankful for that.
Welcome to a place where we discover the freedom and healing found only in Jesus Christ. Through powerful stories, our guests tell how He turns pain into peace, rewrites lives, and restores the wholeness only He can give. This is Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace.
Welcome to Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's topic is adoption, God's heart for the orphan. Infertility is one of those things that a lot of couples struggle with, and so many couples just don't ever feel like their dream of ever having a family is ever going to come to fruition. Today, my special guest is Joel and Amanda Byers, and they're going to share their story of how God answered their prayers for a family through the adoption of their son, Jaxson. Joel is the lead pastor of Central Baptist Church, and he and Amanda have been married for 23 years, and they have a son named Jaxson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes. So, Amanda, I was going to start with you. I know that you grew up as a PK.
Yes.
So, tell me a little bit about your growing up years.
Well, like you said, my dad was a preacher, is a preacher. I think he'll always be a preacher, even though he's retired. But every time the church doors were open, we were there. So that's all I grew up knowing.
Right.
Being at all the camps and meetings and services and serving, and that's just the way of life I was growing up
Right.
in.
No,
So,
that's wonderful.
yeah.
And I know that you did most of your childhood growing up in Tyler when your
Yes.
dad was called here.
Yes. So we moved here when I was 5. He took a church here, Central Baptist Church in Tyler, when I was 5 years old, and we've been here ever since. He was a pastor there for 35 years.
Wow, I know.
Yeah.
Your father, he is a wonderful, godly man.
He is.
You know, and he
Great
loves
guy.
to serve. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
one thing I found interesting is that when you were in high school, you felt the Lord was telling you to surrender your life to youth ministry.
Yes. So I accepted Jesus as my Savior when I was 11 years old at a church camp. And it wasn't until I think I was 16 or 17, it was in high school, like you said, where I felt the call of the Lord to surrender to ministry.
Wow.
And I didn't know what that looked like for a girl that's kind of different. But I knew I wanted to do youth ministry specifically at that time. So I just started praying, okay, Lord, I'm available, and I just knew going into college, like that was my goal. To my future husband would be surrendered to the ministry, and we would pursue that together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wonderful that he spoke to you so early, you know? And so, and Joel, you're the third out of 4 boys.
I am.
And y'all moved to Tyler,
Yes.
right? Because I know you went to high school here.
Yes. So we moved to Tyler in 1989. My dad was working in the medical field, so Tyler's a big medical city, as everybody knows. And so he came here when it was Trinity Mother Francis and worked here in the medical field. And so that's what brought us to Tyler in 1989. And it's been home ever since. We love East Texas.
Right. And I had learned also, just like Amanda, that the Lord called you to ministry in high school.
Yeah.
And this is before y'all even met.
Yes,
Yeah.
So, what's crazy is, a little backstory. So we were in 3rd grade together. So that's what's crazy.
Oh.
So in our 3rd grade yearbook, we are like side by side, but we didn't even know it either. Like she remembers me because I was the crazy, silly kid. But, she said she had her yearbook out and she said, "Look, there we are." And I was like, "What? You were in my class?"
Right. I know.
But it was about when I was 18 years old, I got invited by a friend to church, and I'd always been in church all my life, was saved when I was 16 years old, but typical East Texas, grew up in church, always was in church anytime the doors were open, but Jesus became real to me, and really I felt the transformation of my life whenever at 16 years old. And so at 16 years old, I gave my life to Jesus at a summer church camp. I always joke and I say, I went there looking for a girlfriend and I found Jesus. So, you know, so
he's better than a girlfriend.
He's way better than a girlfriend. and so then got saved at 16, and at 18 years old, I felt that the Lord was leading in my heart. I've always had a desire to serve. In the church I grew up in, it was a smaller church. And so the youth pretty much ran the youth. And so we were serving and leading in those areas. And then at 16, when I got saved, man, it just really became real to me. And so at 18 is when I felt that calling and just knew that that's what I wanted to do, and there was nothing else I wanted to do different.
Right. Well, I knew that both of y'all had a love for mentoring and shepherding the youth, and that you were called early to do that. And then both of y'all, I think, were interns, youth interns at one point, and then youth pastors at one point. And so, so tell us that when did y'all started dating? Like a year after college, and then got married 2 years after that?
Yeah, that's a funny story too. So I got invited by a friend to come to church, and I had met Amanda that night. There was a missionary there, and they were doing this missionary send-off. They were leaving to go to the mission field, and they had like a pizza party. And so I go into the gym, and I seen, we were seniors in high school, and I saw this pretty blonde girl, and I went up to her, and she had a beautiful smile, and I went up to her and I said, hey, you know, you're really pretty. And I was like, I said, I'd be interested in talking to you. And she said, I'm moving away. I'm going off to college. And that was it. Like, didn't want anything to do with me, nothing. So shot down. And then we met a year later at Bible college. And there at the college we went to, there was a thing called College Days, and you can go tour the campus and just see if you wanted to go there. And the youth pastor had invited me to go, and she was going. And on the way up there, he said, hey, well, pastor's daughter is coming to the thing. And I was like, oh, I remember meeting her. And so so I was excited. She didn't know I was coming, but I was excited to see her.
Right. Yeah. Well, God just had your paths cross again. And
started dating then. And then went to BBC that next year. And dated for a year and then got married.
Right. So y'all were fairly young when you got married.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was, we were
20.
20. Yeah. I turned 21 a month after we got married.
Right.
So we were pretty.
So when y'all, in those early days, y'all talked about like having a family.
Yes.
And so kind of tell me what your thoughts were at that time that you thought, you know.
Yeah, so we always talked about having kids and having a family. It was something we always wanted. And what was funny is when we talked about it, I don't remember at what point we talked about it, but I think you said, I've always been open to adoption. I said, me too. Like, I would love to adopt. So I think starting out, our original plan was for us to have our own children biologically, and then to have adopted children. And so God had a different plan. But
we always said we want at least 2 kids, maybe 3, no more than 4.
Yeah,
so then we have one.
But, you know, it's very sweet, though, that the Lord put it on both of y'all's hearts for adoption, because not everybody is called to that. You know, actually, most people aren't. You know, so that is kind of a rare thing. And so y'all got married fairly early, and then after a few years, then you realized, you know, you were struggling with infertility. And so kind of tell me how that was for y'all.
So we got some advice when we were newly married to wait a few years before we started our family, and just so we could spend time together. And so I think we decided to wait 4 years before we started trying to get pregnant. And so we waited 4 years, started to try, and nothing happened. And we kept trying, and about probably 3 or 4 months into that, you kind of start to get discouraged. Like, why is this not happening? Like, some people, the first time they try, they get pregnant. And so we went to the doctor, and the doctor at the time was like, I want you to try for a year and see how it goes, and see if your body responds and you get pregnant. And So we made an appointment for the following year. And he said, if not, then we'll start infertility and start examining more things. And so we tried for a year. Nothing happened. And then we went back to that appointment. And so he set us up with the infertility specialist. And we started getting testing done on myself and him just to see what the issues were. And we didn't know at the time that I had severe endometriosis. And so I could get pregnant. It was very hard for me to get pregnant. And so we did medications. We did different types of procedures to try to help that along. And nothing ever came from that. It never progressed. I was talking the other day, and it was kind of like you just hit a brick wall. Like you just keep hitting the same wall over and over because it's just, you would try something else and nothing would happen. And
so would you say it would be like at least 2 years that y'all were going through this infertility and all the different procedures?
At least 2 years, maybe 3.
Okay.
And then we got to a point where the infertility specialist was like, okay, we need to have a conversation. Like we can go to in vitro, I believe, was the next big step. And we had already been talking and praying and, just decided, okay, we can go financially through infertility procedures or we can pursue adoption. And I think God just prepared our hearts that we're going to pursue adoption. And if we get pregnant in the meantime, that's awesome. And praise the Lord. But if not, we're just going to pursue adoption. And so we decided to put all our resources toward that.
Right.
But we never stopped trying. There was no preventatives from that point forward. So we could have got pregnant at any point in time. And we just never did.
leave it up to the Lord, And so I know those years definitely were very hard. And I'm sure, Joel, that you saw in Amanda just the frustration. And even though, you're very much a part of the equation, I don't know if infertility tends to affect the women more, or does it also affect men?
I think it does, and I'm glad you asked that question. I think not to the degree it does the wife, but for me, I think there was just those selfish moments where it was like, you were thinking, I hope it's not me. I hope it's not, I hope I'm not the problem, and she'll resent me or whatever. But then you start to internalize that and go, but if it's not me, then it's her. And then my heart was broke for her. And I was just like, well, gosh, maybe I could handle it more if it was me. So maybe I could handle it better. And so then when we got the clarity on it, there was just, I think it was just, you always think, oh, there's gonna be a sigh of relief, but it really wasn't, because then it just moved to care for her of, her feeling less than because she can't be a mom and couldn't do those things and stuff like that. And so I think immediately that's when we just went to a care mode, and it went to a more of a, it's okay, I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm going to turn everything into a positive. And so I'm just like, it just means God had other plans for us, and that we've already talked about adoption, and that just kind of, I think, peaked in her mind of, we did talk about adoption, and and this is what we can do.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think maybe, as we continue talking, I think that, if the Lord lays on your heart, things that the husband could say to the wife, and then things that the wife could say to the husband, because there is a lot of internal thinking going on, and, not really, almost afraid to ask your spouse, how do you really feel about everything? So it is definitely a struggle that couples have to work through.
I think for her, I mean, she just immediately felt like failure, like what's wrong with my body, what's wrong with me, and I just had to remind her in that moment. Number one, that this is God's plan; it doesn't shock God. This didn't surprise God. But then number two, just reminding her that this is medical. Like it's nothing that you caused or something that you asked for or did. And so just reminding those truths and just speaking that truth into that lie that wants to defeat you.
And I think for him, for husbands, I would say, I know most husbands want to fix it. They want to be the fixer. And he couldn't fix that. He couldn't fix me getting pregnant. He couldn't force that to happen. And so,
We tried a lot.
Right. Get practice.
We did practice.
Yeah.
We did.
So funny.
We tried.
I know.
but he was one of the things he did really well is he let me feel my feelings.
Yeah.
So with infertility, some days are harder than others. Some days you just have moments where you break down. You have moments where you feel like it's never going to happen and you lose all your hope. And he was really good about just letting me cry when I needed to cry.
Good.
Reminding me of truth, reminding me that God still had a plan. He was probably my biggest cheerleader through that time, is just continuing to remind me. So I think that's what he did really well, because there was a lot of defeat and discouragement, and it's kind of like a roller coaster. Some days you're hopeful and you're excited, and then some days you're like, this is never going to happen, and I'm broken, and why won't this happen? Why can't we? And I think that too was one of the things we struggled with, was what we're praying for to get pregnant. It's a good thing. It's not $1 million. It's not something trivial. It's we want to have a family, and this is a good, wholesome thing. Why can't we have this? And so you get to that point, like, God, why aren't you blessing us with this? Like, you've answered so many other prayers. Why can't you answer this one? And so that was a hard thing, I think, that we walked through.
And then I think the reality too, I think that a lot of people don't want to talk about because it makes you sound bad or makes it seem bad, is the fact of then you start to go to the like cashing in your chips with God. You know, it's like, God, we're serving you. God, we gave up our lives to serve you. You know, we're doing ministry, and we've given our life at this point for 4 or 5 years to ministry. And, yes, these kids, that we have in our youth group are our kids, and we love them like they're our kids. But God, we're just asking for this, and we see, people getting pregnant all the time. And so it's like, Lord, why? Like, why? And I'm just crying out to God in like a David moment, going, angry, but also begging God and just saying, God, just answer this prayer for my wife, answer this prayer for us, and just, I think it was more like, I just saw in 1 Samuel and Hannah's story just really related well with us, because she's crying out for a child, desiring a child. And I'm going, Lord, I can't do this. Only you can do this. And so it's funny, because then once she kind of got past the emotional side of it, and she never really, like I said, it wasn't solved until we knew we had Jaxson, but she got to a good place. Then I started going having doubts and going, well, man, like, is adoption really what we want to do? I mean, like, is this, like, what if this kid doesn't love us? Like, what if this kid doesn't love us? Like, what if I'm not a good father, like, to this child? Like, what if, he resents us and all of these things? And you start having those doubts. And she was just like, Joel, you're going to be a great dad. So speaking that truth again into those lies. And so she did a really good job of just speaking truth. You're going to be a great father. You have such great qualities. You've been a great youth pastor to these kids who, we were in Kilgore, Texas, and there was a lot of those kids that didn't have parents that were involved. They didn't have parents that were involved in their life. And so we were like a father and mother to them. And so she saw those characteristics in me. And so she just started speaking that truth. I think that really helped me overcome those fears, that I started having.
Well, I really appreciate y'all's internal dialogue that you had with the Lord, because those are authentic, raw, and real. And you're not dismissing the fact that, hey, this is not fair, Lord. Why are you not blessing us with a child?
Yeah.
And, doing bargains or whatever. But it's just, but at the end of the day, you just realize you're God and I'm not. Yeah. And, we can't keep fighting. You can't fight the Lord on things. And so you just have to surrender, because he's got a better plan, whatever reason.
And you have to trust that, what is he protecting you from that you can't see?
For sure.
And so we thought, what if we were to get pregnant and the baby had horrible health issues or wasn't going to live, or
she grew up with health issues, and so
even worse health issues. What if it would take my life? Like, there's just so many things that you don't know. And so what is God protecting us from? There has to be a plan.
I firmly believe that. Yeah. Firmly believe that. And so, But so when y'all finally got to that place where you were like, okay, we're not going to try anymore for a biological kid, but we're going to step forward in faith and we're going to start looking into this whole adoption process. And so kind of tell the listeners a little bit about what that looked like. Because I know at first y'all were going to go through the foster to adopt, locally here.
Well, I'll just say, I'm blessed to be able to serve on the Fostering Collective board, and it's a great ministry and a great organization. If you're looking into foster care or looking into foster to adopt, they're a great organization they're an organization that can get you plugged into all the information. And so, but there wasn't Fostering Collective when we started the process, and wish there was, because they're a great resource. But for us, it was, we just started asking people around, hey, what do you go through? Who did you go through? What did you go through? And then we just had she was not, so normally if you do foster care, you're open to just having kids in your home and with the probability of them going back with the biological parent and all of that. But because of the emotional place that she was at, she said, hey, I just personally can't be at a place where we have these kids in our home and then they go back, and they leave. And so we did make that process a little bit harder, a little bit tougher, because we narrowed it down to kids that were already, their rights were signed off and signed away. We narrowed it down to under 4 years old, and then minimal health concerns and stuff like that. And so could we have had kids in our home, and could we have had kids in our place? And does the fostering care system work? Absolutely. We just narrowed the system down pretty far because she just didn't want to emotionally go through that hurt of a child being taken away.
Well, I totally understand. And so y'all were in that pool for a short while, and then. But then y'all ended up not having any children, right?
Yeah, we did that for a year. And so how it would work with that agency is they would send us emails a couple times a week of different children that needed placement. And we could talk about it and say, do we want to put our name in on this? And so we did that for several different, we did sibling groups. Yeah. We did several different children, and we just nothing ever came from that. Again, it was kind of like hitting that brick wall. You start to get hopeful and then nothing happens. And so for whatever reason, those doors just didn't open.
Right. So that was kind of a year's process then.
Yes, that was for a year. And so then we were pretty frustrated and discouraged and just kind of at a standstill, I think. We were still in that process, open to it, but after a year and after the years of infertility, you're just like, okay, well, maybe we're just not supposed to be parents. You do start to question that. And we had a conversation on a vacation, and he told me, he said, I'm okay with just us. And I think if we can get to where we're content with just us, God will honor that. And it took me a little bit longer to get there than it did him, but
well, I made a joke and I told her, I said, remember, we're in ministry and I'm a youth pastor, so I'm not making a lot of money. But I said, you know what? If we don't have kids, we'll just get a Corvette.
Right, exactly. She's got to laugh.
I was just making a joke, and she laughed, but it was also just a moment. I think it's a moment that goes back to our core memory in this process of we were just sitting in Galveston at the beach and by the pool that we were at, and we just both looked at each other and said, it's okay. We like us, and if it's just us and it's just our youth kids for the rest of our lives, then
we'll be okay. It doesn't mean that we didn't still want it, but we had a peace about it. And so then we went to church probably the next week, I would say, or pretty soon after that. And a family in our church, their grown children had adopted from Taiwan, and they had the baby with them. They had just brought their little girl home. And somebody said, y'all need to come meet them because they knew we were adoption process. And so we went back there and met them after church, and they let me hold this little girl, and her name was Hope, which was very significant because we kind of felt like we had lost all our hope for having children. And I remember very clearly holding her and handing her back. And when she left my arms, it was as if God just whispered, this is what you're supposed to do. And I didn't know what that looked like or what that meant, but I walked away and I looked at him and I said, this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to adopt internationally. And he was like, how much does that cost?
Yeah, my mind went immediately to the every adoption international costs like $40,000+ and I went to the panic mode of finances.
Yes, and I said I don't know how we're going to afford it, but God.
And her hopes were so high at this point. So I was like, okay, let's calm down. Let's see how much it costs. Let's see.
Well, I think it's ironic that once both of you got to a place of being content with just yourselves. The Lord said, okay, now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And a week later, this person comes to your church with a Taiwanese baby. And so tell us a little bit more about that adoption process. Because, Joel, you mentioned that international adoption is very, very expensive. And so a lot of couples don't pursue that. But tell us the circumstances for this particular.
So I panicked, and so I'll just be honest with you. Like at this point, I think I kind of shut down, and I was just like, "You're gonna have to take the reins on this." And so if you want to pursue this, then not that I was like this absent of those things. I think I was just going. I just went into panic mode of like, okay, I've got to figure this out. She's super excited about this international adoption. I've got to figure out. I got to start giving plasma or something. I got to do something.
2-3 jobs.
And so she was just really, really excited about it. And so I didn't want to squelch that fire. And so I just said, hey, you look into this, you do it, and then figure it all, like find out, and then we'll come back and we'll have this conversation. But I just kind of let her run with it. And so she looked into the organization. So
I just started the paperwork. I contacted the organization, started sending emails. How do we do this? What does this mean? And that family that was there at church that Sunday was a great resource for me. And they got me in contact with other families on Facebook that were also waiting to adopt their children. And so that was a great resource of what do I do next? Where do I need to go? What do I need to expect? And they just kind of guided me all along the journey. So that was really helpful. I wasn't just waiting for the phone to ring.
I mean, this is the first time you were looking at international adoption. I mean, you've got the whole world.
Yes. And it's so
where do you
foreign.
start?
Like, where do you start? What do you do? And so we decided to go through their organization. And they have an orphanage in Taiwan that's called the Home of God's Love. And
and they specifically catered to families who have medical reasons that they can't have kids. So.
Yes, they want to.
So they want. We didn't know how much they blessed, but till we got in the process. But.
Yeah, so it was an older couple who ran the organization, ran the orphanage, and then some of their grown children ran the organization on the U.S. side. And anyways, we started the process of applying for adoption. And at that time, we weren't matched to a child. But a month later, after getting all that finalized, getting our home study done and all of those things, all those ducks in a row, he called late one night. And I put him on speaker, and
she goes, "Joel, come here." And I was like, "Okay, I was like, don't get your hopes up. Like, let's see."
But I remember that phone call. I remember his voice and him saying, "We have a little guy here that needs a family. Would you guys be willing to taking him?" And we get emotional, and I was like, yes, we'll take anything.
Well, I think we stopped at guy because we had only picked out girl names because usually in the Asian culture, they adopt out the girls, and so we had only picked out girl names.
Yes, so we're like, I didn't care. I was like, we'll figure it out. Yeah. So while we're talking to him and he's telling us the next steps, I don't even know if we heard anything because we were scribbling boy names because we had to pick out a name on that phone call. So he was a month old at that time. And anyway, so at that point, they matched us to him. And we started the next we had, I don't remember what we did next.
So
but
it wasn't long after you started this whole
no, it was probably a month or two into it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was being born.
Yes. Yeah, he was being born. Everything was just being provided and coming to fruition. And
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is.
Well, and some of the backstory to this organization, I mean, all the worries about the financial side, you know, we're calling them and we're asking them, like, what do we need to do and what do we have to do? And they're like, it's all taken care of. Like, don't worry about it. Like we cover the cost. We cover all this. And we're just like, you cover the cost? Like, what are you talking about? Like, and everything on the Taiwan side, they covered all of that cost. Okay. And so on the state side, to make him a U.S. citizen and to get him his all of his paperwork to make it legal and all of those things on this side cost around $11,000, which is a third of what we were told, or maybe even a fourth of what we were told.
Oh, wow.
You know, and so it ended being about $11,000. But even God was working through that, because the minute she told her family, hey, we got matched, you know, or this is where we're doing, this is the plan, we're going this way. Right. Family stepped up and gave financially. Our church community came around us, which we weren't even at Central, I think, at the time. We were at Central. I can't remember. We were at Central. And so, but our Central church family stepped up and did a garage sale fundraiser and gave them funds to that. So all that money was raised before. So God knew my stresses, and then He knew her desires and our desires, and so He just took care of all of those things so quickly, and just everything was just falling in place. And like I said, it ended up being a very smooth process that we just got to enjoy, you know, once it was there.
So you got the call when he was 1 month old.
Yeah.
And then y'all started making plans, and you said yes. And then how much later was it when you actually...
So I'll tell you, Taiwan does things a little bit different than the United States does. So in the United States, when you have your court date, that's usually when your adoption is final and you take your child home and they're yours. Legally. So for us in Taiwan, they do a court date whenever, I guess, they get everything, all the paperwork ready. They set a court date, and you go and you have to be present for court. And then you have to wait for a decree to be finalized. And that can take months. It can take a year. We knew families that had been waiting a year for their decree to come through.
Okay.
So we ended up having to go to Taiwan twice. Okay. On our first visit, he was 5 months old.
Okay.
And so from 1 month to 5 months, we went back. We went to Taiwan, and then we went to court. And so his biological mom and biological grandmother, who had not seen him since birth, he had been living in the orphanage, and they met us at court. And then culturally, they had this where they go back to the orphanage and say their final goodbyes to the child, which made me a nervous wreck, because I thought, what if she changes her mind? Or what if, you know, they haven't seen this child in 4 months or 5 months? What if they, you know, what if they decide they don't want to do this? And so I was pretty nervous. So we waited in the other room, and they said their goodbyes. But it was a really sweet moment. I'm so thankful for the memory, because then they brought us in, and I was just crying. I couldn't stop crying. And, you know, we have a translator in the room because we don't speak Taiwanese. And the mom, she was holding him, and she handed it to me, and I was weeping. I just said, thank you. I couldn't do this. You gave me this. Thank you. And she goes, oh, and she wiped the tears off my face. And she was 17 years old, so she was very young. But for her to do that was such a sweet memory I have of her comforting me. Yes. And just blessing me, giving me this child to raise as my own, and she didn't have the means to. It was sacrificial on her part, but I'm so thankful. I will always be thankful for that.
So you got him when he was 5 months?
Well, I'm sorry. So then we had, that was 5 months, and then we had to go back home because
wait for the decree.
So I thought that was going to be the end of us because she was like, there was another mom that was there, and they had worked it out where she was staying until she brought the child home. She was staying at the orphanage and working at the orphanage, and she wanted to do that. Like Amanda was like, I can't go home. I can't go home. I can't leave him. I've already held him. He's mine. And there's that fear too, that just, what would happen, because also, any time before the decree, if any Taiwanese family stepped up, they could adopt the child too. And so there was that chance. So not only the mom, but any Taiwanese family could step up and take precedent over us. And so once she heard that, she was like, I'm staying. And I was like, we got to go home. We got to go home. We got to work. We got to do these things. And I was like, I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. And that was a really tough conversation. But, so then we come home, and then it was when Jaxson was 9 months old.
9 months old. So it was just only 4 months then for the decree.
Yeah.
But it was hard in that time because, so they would send us 2 pictures on the 1st of every month. Yeah. So, and they would kind of give, hey, Mom and Dad, I'm doing this now, or I'm holding the bottle on my own now, or I'm starting to crawl, or whatever.
Right.
And so that was hard, and I kept saying, he's going to be walking before we go back, and he wasn't. He was crawling, but he wasn't walking or talking or anything. He was still a baby, and it's funny, too, like the day that we got the email that our decree was finalized and we could book the flight to go get him. That morning I was at work, and I called my mom just crying, and I said, this is never going to happen. This door is never going to, you just, like I said before, you have those roller coasters of emotions. And this isn't going to happen. And she said, don't give up hope yet. Like, God has a plan. And so we just kept waiting and trusting. And then that afternoon I got an email, your decree is finalized. Your son is ready for you. So we booked those flights, and
right.
As soon as we could get on a plane, we did. And so
that's insane.
Yeah.
And so we were able to go get him and bring him home, and it was the week before Mother's Day, and so we brought him home, and she got to we brought him on stage for Mother's Day, and it was a sweet moment. It was a sweet moment.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny how everything happened so quickly. I mean, even though it felt like a lifetime when y'all were walking through all of that, like every day was like 10 years probably.
Yes.
But when you look back, it was a very short time frame that the Lord said, Jaxson is yours. Yes. And he's going to be yours. And you just have to wait until I give him to you.
Yes, until I finalize it. Yes.
Right.
When you're in I think that's just a good reminder for anybody, no matter if you're just listening to this because you just stumbled upon this podcast and you're just listening to it. I think it's a good reminder of whatever your circumstances is. It feels like an eternity when you're in the middle of a battle or in the middle of a circumstance, but in that waiting period. But man, when you look back and God has answered that prayer, then you look back and you go, man, like, it wasn't that bad.
Right.
It wasn't like we made it was so overwhelming in the moment, but
well, I think he definitely was orchestrating what needed to happen.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because Jaxson is amazing. I mean, and he's got her kindness and my humor and I just don't think we just think about God's grace and how he just took a situation that we thought was just over and hopeless, and he knew it's weird. It's almost like God knows what he's doing,
Right.
It's almost like
he
God
does.
knows what he's doing.
Even when the road is so hard, because I mean, you don't want people to struggle like you had struggled, but there was so much that he taught you through that.
Yes.
And, and it sounds like y'all's marriage actually grew closer together versus falling apart, because definitely that happens as well, too.
Yes, for sure.
And so, But yeah, so Jaxson, how old is he now?
He's 13 years old now.
13.
He's a teenager, so
Okay.
it's fun.
Yes.
We've entered the teen years, so
But
he's a good kid.
I'm sure he's just fine. So,
Yeah.
you know.
He doesn't like to do chores, but he's fine.
Well, I don't like to do chores.
I don't either.
I can't blame him. So, but yeah, so he's in what?
Eighth grade.
Eighth grade?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's going to be in high school next year. And now we're on the other side of it. Now we're on the side of, oh my gosh, 4 years and he's going to be graduated. And so now we're on the other emotional roller coaster side of it.
Trying to wrap your brain around.
I know. Y'all are going to have such a close relationship for many, many years, for decades to come. And I mean, I probably shouldn't even say this on the air, but I just felt like the Lord just gave me this vision that y'all are going to have like tons of grandchildren.
That would be
Tons
awesome.
of
That would be
grandchildren. Half Taiwanese
That would be-
grandchildren
Oh, I
running
love it.
around.
Yes, I
And
love
you
that.
will get them from birth.
Yes.
And you will be very active in
Yeah.
caring for them
That's really
because
sweet.
that's just how he is.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know. And so Jaxson, have you told him he knows about the adoption?
Yes. So it's kind of a funny story. We're never going to keep it a secret, because we don't all look the same. Like he was gonna know at some point, but I think it was kindergarten or first grade. We were in the car driving, and I think Joel was out of town, and Jaxson was in the back seat, and I was driving him home, and we were talking about someone being pregnant, and he said, like I was in your belly. And so I said, well, no. And, those conversations always happen when you're not really prepared for them. And so I said, no, actually, I got to adopt you, and the Lord provided. And you have. And so it was hard, but I kept it very basic and simple at the time because he was very young. And he didn't seem fazed by it at all. And then I had to call Joel and be like, oh my gosh, this conversation happened. I didn't know exactly what to say, but we've always talked about it. It's not a secret. It's not a negative. It's a positive thing in our eyes. So we talk about it. We've talked about if he wants to know anything about his birth mom, if he wants to know anything about Taiwan, if he wants to go visit Taiwan. And so we occasionally will bring it up and see where he's at. And so far, he's content with our home and our life and hasn't wanted to know more. I think as he gets older, he probably will want to know more.
And there's some funny moments. I mean, when he was in like second or third grade, Amanda would take him lunch at school because she worked at the school he worked at, and she would take him lunch sometimes. And this one little girl, he said, "This is my mom," and he was real proud, and the little girl's looking at Amanda and looking at Jaxson, looking at Amanda, looking at Jaxson, and she goes, "No," she goes, "No," and so that led to some further conversations with Jaxson and just saying, our family looks different and that's okay. And then it led to some conversations about like, hey, you can talk to us anytime about like if you feel like some emotions about being different or feeling different, or if people are teasing you or making fun of you. And then at some point she also had pulled out that picture of his mom and kind of had a discussion with him about his mom, and this was his grandmother, and this was all of these people, and he was just, but then even on that, he's very logical with it. He's always been a very logical kid, and so he just very logical with it. He's just like, okay, that's kind of the answer, and that's what it is. And then, but then it's just been. Those conversations we haven't had any major issues in those conversations. And I know that some families do, and we mourn with them and grieve with them, on those tough conversations. But so far with him, but we do ask him, our church, we go on mission trips every year. We actually have 2 missionaries in Taiwan. And so we've asked him, hey, do you ever think that you'd want to go see our missionaries in Taiwan and then see the orphanage? And as of right now, he says he doesn't care.
Well, he's 13, so I bet in 10 years
I
it's
think
going to
he
be
will.
different when he realizes, well, maybe
Yeah.
I do want to kind of trace my roots,
Yes.
and y'all will be ready to take him then.
Yes, for sure.
And so, but I'm glad that y'all did show him that picture,
Yes.
with his mom and his grandmother.
Yeah.
so he could see and kind of his mom giving him birth was a big gift.
Right.
Because he could have just been a statistic.
For sure.
Yes.
And so so that in itself, but yeah, some adoptive kids, they do have, just that complex of like, I never was wanted or anything like that. But I know adopted kids that don't have that, and they never, their adoptive parents is all they know, is all they need. They don't feel like they're lacking anything, and I feel like Jaxson is in that boat,
Yes.
So, but yeah, do you feel, because he's culturally, obviously ethnic different,
Right.
but have y'all had any issues with that per se, or?
Personally, we don't see his. We forget. He's so much like us, and so much, So and we wish we had his tans. So we wish we had his tan. But he is. But we do joke back and forth. He has a great sense of humor, so he'll make jokes about him being different, and we'll make jokes as a family and stuff like that. And we have a good sense of humor about it. I think when we first brought him home, there was some weird things that were said that we would have to like deal with. There was like this one guy was like, so is the mom Filipino or is the mom Asian? And I was like, no. I was like, we adopted him, and the guy was like, do you regret it? I'm like, no, not at all. Like, not at all. So people say just silly things or crazy things, and they just don't. They just don't know what they're saying sometimes, and so we would just talk through those things, and so we've just been very honest with Jaxson and just said, hey, you can always talk to us if you ever feel picked on, or if you ever feel like somebody's making fun of you because of your ethnicity or anything like that, or because we're white and you're not, you're Taiwanese, and like you can always be open and honest. And so he's always been very honest about that, and I don't think it's been a situation where God's just, I think, got him around some really good friends and some really good people. And from the beginning, our church is just, he's been a part of that story. So yeah.
He's your son, regardless what country he was born in. So, I was sharing with y'all because I'm Taiwanese, and I was born in Taiwan, and then I moved when I was 3. I have no recollection of Taiwan, but even growing up, because I was, Chinese looking, kids sometimes would say stupid things.
Yes.
But I never paid attention to it. I'm just like, you're the problem. I'm not the problem.
That's a good. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Right. And
Blow it off.
And obviously I don't forget that I'm Chinese, but the race doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how it is. For us,
Right. So that's good that, there's really not anything there that he's struggling with. And
So far it seems good. I think that's probably a fear in the back of our minds, especially when we was younger, because we knew as we get into the teen years that might be something we would face at some point. But so far, it has not been an issue.
Right.
He's such a loving kid. And so, still at 13, he still loves his mom, and sees that she's just the best thing in the world, and he loves me, and we have our sarcastic relationship and all of that. But so I think she thought she was going to lose that, the older he got. And right now he's still very loving and affectionate towards his mom, and just very, very caring towards his mom and stuff like that. And so,
Amanda, I had the same fear also when my boys were growing up, and they're very clingy to mom at the start. But then somewhere in 8 to 12 range, they kind of migrate over to the father, which is what is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
But even to this day, my boys are 25 and 27, and they still come to me. I cut their strawberries. I do this. I lay their clothes out. They still need their mama.
Yes.
So it just it changes a little bit, but that love is still there. And so, but no, I think that's wonderful, and I think Jaxson, he has grown up in the church.
Yeah.
He knows the Lord.
Yes.
And y'all are very, very grateful, I know, to the Lord for
Yes.
his life.
Yes.
And that, and I know Jaxson is very grateful to y'all for his life, because his life could have been very different.
Yeah.
And so, so looking back, y'all have shared your story with other couples who've kind of walked through just not being able to have their own children and stuff. And so what do you tell them now to help them just stay in the game, keep that hope up, whatever it is God's plan is for them? Because sometimes we don't know what God's plan is for us.
We don't. It doesn't make sense to us.
Right.
So what I usually tell them is, if you're still breathing, God still has a plan. He still has a purpose for your life. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how he's going to bring this to fruition for you. But I believe he's still working, and he still has something for you if you're still alive. So let's not lose hope. Let's not give up in trusting that. And I remind them too, when we started in the very beginning trying to get pregnant, our prayers were, please let us get pregnant. Please let us have a baby. That was what we begged God for years. And then at some point we switched to adoption, and then please let us be able to adopt a baby. Please provide a baby that's healthy and that we can love. And so our prayers changed a little bit, and the desires of our hearts to be parents were the same, but the avenue of how we were going to get there changed. And so, but God provided more than we could have even asked for. And so I've shared this before, like God provided what I didn't know how to ask for. He gave me the life that I always wanted. It's a life better than I thought it could be. But I didn't know to pray for that in the very beginning. All I knew was I wanted to get pregnant. I wanted that pregnancy test to stay positive. That was my goal. That's where we started to where we ended up was, how he provided for us.
Right. No, I think that is good. And I know there was some scripture, Amanda, that really just,
got me through.
Yeah, got you through.
So Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is my life verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And that was my life verse probably from high school. And this going through infertility and adoption, that became very significant to me, trusting the Lord in every step, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Why is that in the Bible?
Yes.
Because he's a good God, and he knows the desires of your heart. He's not forgotten you. He's not abandoned you. He didn't leave me there. He rescued me from not being able to have my own biological children to giving me a child and making me a mother. And in Psalms, I think it's 113:9 says, he will give the barren woman a home and make her a mother. And he did that for me. And I remember reading that scripture, and I felt like God wrote that just for me. And he didn't. He wrote it for millions of people everywhere, billions. But, he did. He made me a mom. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a mom. And now I'm so thankful that this is our story. I'm so thankful that I have an adopted son. I'm so thankful that I have a son from Taiwan. Like, I'm so grateful that this is what we get to live out and get to raise him as our own. I'm so thankful for that.
Well, we couldn't have wrote this story, and that's the cool thing is that how amazing God is. And when you think of the scripture in Isaiah where it says God's ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, it just pulls everything back into focus of God is sovereign and God has a plan, and it may not be in your timing, it may not be your plan, but his plans are so much better than ours. And it's easy on this side of it to see that and to say that and to see it. And you're in the midst of the storm. It's, God, where are you? God, what are you doing? God, why, are you not doing this? But on this side, you can always go back and go, okay, Lord, like, we saw your plan. And I think even if God never blessed us with a child, we would still see that, God, your ways are higher than our ways, your thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And that's where I think as Christians and as believers and as humans, we have to get to a point that God is greater than us, and his timing is better than us, and his plan is better than ours. And so it's just coming to that acknowledgement.
Right. Right. Well, y'all's story just reminds me of Ephesians 3:20, that the Lord can do immeasurably more than we can ever ask or imagine. And it's so much better.
Yes. It is.
And so, I mean, look at how your lives have been so full, and even though those 7 years was really hard, it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it.
It was way worth
and
it.
So I know. And so, but thank you so much
Thank
to
you
both
for
of
having
y'all
us. Yeah.
to share. And I hope to meet Jaxson
Yes.
one day, my
Yes, we'll bring him
Taiwanese
by.
buddy.
Yes.
And so I know a few words in Taiwanese that I could teach him,
Okay.
but only a few. But,
Only a few.
but anyways,
Well, he doesn't know. So you probably know more than him.
Yes, and I definitely see a trip to Taiwan one
Yes,
day when
yeah,
he's
he would be excited.
older,
Yeah,
so he
we would love
can
that.
just see just where he came from.
Yeah.
You know,
You can go with us.
'cause you better text me. Well, I don't know if I can. I've been there several
Yes,
times
yes.
just to visit, but I don't know if I can show you around.
That's right, that's right.
But anyways, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Appreciate y'all. So. Well, that wraps it up for today's Getting Real to Heal with Dr. Grace, and I will see you the next time. Bye now.
This podcast is made possible in part by Express Employment Professionals, the leading staffing agency in East Texas, helping thousands of businesses find the right employees. If you're looking for a job, visit expresspros.com to learn more. If you enjoyed this podcast, visit deepentheheartministries.com/podcast, where you can find all previous episodes, subscribe to our channel, or leave a suggestion for future topics. You can also email Grace at drgraceenglish.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.